If you're over 60 and you eat leftovers, pay close attention to the next 11 minutes. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't a general warning about processed food or red meat. It's about 5 specific foods that millions of seniors reheat every single week in their microwaves and on their stovetops, and the chemical changes that happen during that reheating process that researchers are now directly connecting to rising colon cancer rates in older adults. Colon cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death in the United States. And according to the American Cancer Society, rates among adults over 60 have climbed significantly over the past decade. The link to diet is clear, but the specific connection to reheated foods is something most people have never heard about, and most doctors simply don't have time to explain. That changes today. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and this channel exists to bring you the most current, evidence-based health information designed specifically for life after 60. If you're new here, please subscribe so you don't miss our weekly videos, because what we cover could genuinely change how you approach your health. Now let's get into each of these 5 foods because the reasons they become dangerous when reheated are very different from one another. And understanding those differences is exactly what gives you the power to protect yourself. The first food on this list surprises almost everyone. Spinach and other leafy greens like beet greens and celery. These are among the healthiest foods on the planet. Nobody questions that, but here's what most people don't know. Spinach is naturally very high in nitrates. Nitrates by themselves are not the problem. When you cook spinach, you break down the natural enzymes that keep those nitrates stable. Then when the spinach cools and sits in your refrigerator, bacteria begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. So far, still manageable. But when you reheat that spinach, especially at high temperatures in a microwave, those nitrites undergo a further chemical reaction and form compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are among the most well-documented carcinogens in food science research. A 2021 analysis published in Food Chemistry specifically highlighted the rapid formation of N-nitroso compounds in reheated leafy vegetables and called for greater public awareness. The colon is particularly vulnerable to these compounds because it is where food waste and its chemical byproducts spend the most time before leaving the body. Occasional exposure is not the same as chronic exposure. But if reheating last night's sautéed spinach is a daily habit, that accumulation over months and years is exactly what researchers are concerned about. I want to pause here and ask you something. Has a doctor or nutritionist ever warned you specifically about reheating your vegetables? Comment yes or no below, because I genuinely want to understand how wide this gap in public health education really is. The second food is one that almost every family eats multiple times a week. Rice. Cooked rice presents a 2-part problem when it comes to reheating. First, rice that has been cooked and left to cool can grow a bacteria called Bacillus cereus that produces toxins resistant to heat. Those toxins don't disappear when you reheat the rice, but the second issue is less well known and more directly relevant to colon cancer risk. When rice is cooked, cooled, and then reheated at high temperatures, acrylamide begins to form. Acrylamide is a compound listed as a probable human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. A review published in the journal Nutrients in 2020 found a consistent pattern linking dietary acrylamide exposure to elevated colorectal cancer risk, particularly in older adults whose detoxification pathways are less efficient than they were decades ago. The senior gut processes these compounds more slowly and less effectively than a younger person's gut, which is why age-specific risk is a genuine medical concern and not simply a general population warning. Here is what shocked me most when I first began reviewing the literature on this topic, and it brings us directly to food number 3. Reheated red meat, particularly leftover beef, pork, and lamb, becomes a significantly different product chemically when it goes through a second round of high-temperature cooking. The first time you cook red meat at temperatures above 300 degrees Fahrenheit, you form compounds called heterocyclic amines, commonly called HCAs. Research from the National Cancer Institute has extensively documented the link between HCAs and colorectal cancer over the past 2 decades. But here's the part that most people don't know. When you reheat that already cooked meat in a skillet or microwave, especially if you're trying to get it hot quickly, the surface temperature spikes, and you generate even more HCAs than were present after the first cooking. A 2022 study published in the Journal of Hazardous Materials measured HCA concentrations in meat after multiple heating cycles and found a substantial and progressive increase with each reheat event. For adults over 60, whose colon cells are already more susceptible to carcinogenic damage due to decades of cumulative exposure and natural cellular aging, this compounding HCA load represents a risk that is not trivial. Margaret was 67 when she came to me concerned about bloating and persistent changes in her digestion that had been building for about 2 years. She wasn't alarmed enough to seek testing on her own because she assumed the changes were just normal aging. When I reviewed her daily habits, one thing stood out immediately. She was reheating leftover pot roast and beef stew in a cast iron skillet nearly every day, getting it sizzling hot before eating. After she transitioned to the approach I'll describe in a few minutes, her inflammatory markers dropped at her 6-month follow-up. She had a colonoscopy, and we caught one early polyp, which was removed without complication. Earlier intervention, driven by a simple dietary conversation, may have made a significant difference in her long-term outcome. Food number 4 is one that most seniors grew up eating without a second thought. Processed meats. Bacon, sausage, ham, hot dogs, and deli meats all contain sodium nitrite as a preservative. When you first cook these products, nitrite chemistry is already a concern. The World Health Organization classified processed meats as a Group 1 carcinogen for colorectal cancer in 2015, placing them in the same risk category as tobacco for that specific cancer type. But reheating them dramatically amplifies the problem. When nitrites are exposed to high heat a second time, the rate of nitrosamine formation accelerates sharply. Microwaving bacon that was already cooked, or reheating deli ham in a hot pan, creates a concentrated burst of these compounds in a very short time. Research from the University of Cambridge found that regular consumption of processed meats increased colorectal cancer risk by approximately 18% for every 50 grams consumed daily. Now consider that baseline risk combined with the additional nitrosamine load from reheating. For adults over 60 who already carry higher baseline cancer risk simply because of age, this combination deserves serious, immediate attention. Before I reveal the 5th food and give you the complete protocol for protecting yourself, I want to ask you directly, how many of these 4 foods do you regularly reheat? Honestly, think about your weekly habits. Drop your answer in the comments below, because understanding your own patterns is the first step toward changing them. The 5th food is one I suspect will genuinely surprise you: reheated cooking oil. This isn't about the food itself, but when you reheat any dish that was originally cooked in vegetable oil, particularly sunflower, corn, or soybean oil, or when you reuse oil in a pan that has already been heated once, that oil undergoes a process called oxidation. Oxidized lipids, also called lipid peroxides, are the byproducts of overheated polyunsaturated fats. Research published in the British Journal of Nutrition has linked dietary oxidized lipid intake to increased inflammation in the colon wall and to a measurably higher incidence of colorectal adenomas, which are the precursor lesions to colon cancer. A 2023 study from Spanish researchers found that adults who regularly consumed food reheated in previously used vegetable oil had a statistically significant increase in colon polyp recurrence rates compared to those who used fresh oil or more heat-stable fats. For seniors, this matters because polyp recurrence is one of the primary pathways to colon cancer development in the decades after 60. Now, here's exactly what you should do with all of this information. For leafy greens, eat them fresh when possible. If you do cook them, eat them the same day and do not reheat. Eat them cold as a salad topping rather than warming them back up. For rice, store it properly by cooling it quickly and refrigerating within 1 hour of cooking. When you reheat it, add a tablespoon of water and use the lowest microwave setting to warm it gently rather than bringing it to a full steam. Reheat rice 1 time only, never twice. For red meat and processed meats, the safest approach is to cook only what you will eat in a single sitting. If you have leftovers, eat them cold rather than reheating. For processed meats like bacon and deli cuts, aim to reduce overall consumption to fewer than 2 servings per week, and commit to never reheating them at high temperature under any circumstances. For reheating any food originally cooked in oil, switch your cooking fat. Extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil are significantly more heat-stable than vegetable or seed oils and produce far fewer oxidized lipids when reheated. Finally, for any food you do reheat, the rule is low and slow. Use lower microwave power settings, cover containers to trap moisture and reduce surface temperature spikes, and reheat to warm rather than to steaming hot. These simple adjustments significantly reduce the formation of harmful compounds across every category we discussed. Before changing anything in your diet, especially if you are on blood thinners, have kidney disease, or have an existing gastrointestinal condition, please speak with your doctor first. And if you are over 60 and have not had a colonoscopy in the last 5 years, please schedule one. Most of the cellular changes that lead to colon cancer are completely silent until they are advanced. Early detection remains the most powerful tool available to you. Frank was 71 and had been eating the same reheated meals for years, including rice, bacon, and pan-fried beef several times a week. He felt fine. That's exactly why colon cancer is called the silent disease. After he made the specific changes described today, his colonoscopy at age 73 came back completely clear for the first time in a decade. Small changes, applied consistently, produce real outcomes. The core message of everything we covered today is this: the danger is not leftovers as a concept. The danger is the specific chemical transformation that 5 ordinary foods undergo when they are reheated incorrectly or too many times. Understanding that distinction puts you back in control. If you're going to start somewhere, choose one food from this list and change how you handle it this week. Comment below with which one you're starting with. And if any of this was new information for you, comment, "I had no idea." So others watching know they're not alone in that. If you have a parent, sibling, or friend over 60 who reheats these foods regularly, please share this video with them today. If this was valuable to you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what we're covering next week. We're going into the specific nutrients that research now shows can actively support colon cell repair in adults over 60, including the exact forms that actually absorb at our age, because most supplements in this category are wasted money. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Your health after 60 is not something to leave to chance. It's something to actively protect, one informed decision at a time.